My husband left me for his 23-year-old assistant, thinking he was getting the promotion and the girl. Wait until you hear how I ended up as CEO of the company he'd dreamed of running his entire career. I still remember every detail of that Tuesday morning when my world split in half. The autumn rain was drumming against the windows of our downtown Seattle office, casting rippling shadows across the mahogany conference table where I'd just finished presenting our quarterly marketing projections. 22 years I'd worked at Meridian Technologies. 22 years of climbing from junior analyst to senior vice president of strategic development. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 22 years of believing that hard work, loyalty, and genuine partnership would eventually pay off. My name is Amara Richardson, and until that devastating Tuesday, I thought I had it all figured out. At 45, I was respected in the tech industry, financially secure, and married to Dale Richardson, my college sweetheart and business partner of 18 years. We were the power couple everyone admired, both of us executives at the same Fortune 500 company, finishing each other's sentences in board meetings, supporting each other through late nights and high-pressure deals. Dale was the vice president of operations, positioned perfectly for the CEO succession everyone knew was coming. Marcus Whitmore, our 68-year-old CEO, had been dropping hints about retirement for months. The board was quietly evaluating internal candidates, and Dale had been the presumed heir apparent since he'd successfully led the company through our major expansion into European markets 3 years prior. I was proud of him, proud of us. We'd built something extraordinary together, not just a marriage, but a professional legacy that would outlast both of us. Our colleagues often joke that we were like a well-oiled machine, anticipating each other's strategies, complementing each other's strengths. I handled the creative vision and market analysis. He managed operations and implementation. Together, we were unstoppable, or so I believed. That Tuesday started like any other. Dale had left early for his usual 6 a.m. workout, kissing my forehead, as I pretended to still be asleep. We'd driven to work separately. I had an early client breakfast. He had a leadership team meeting. Normal. Routine. The kind of comfortable predictability that comes with decades of shared life. The first crack in my perfect world appeared during my 10 a.m. coffee break. I was scrolling through emails when Jenny Martinez from HR approached my corner office, her usually cheerful demeanor replaced by something I couldn't quite read. Jenny and I had been friends for years. She'd been a bridesmaid at my wedding, had celebrated every promotion with me, knew all my favorite coffee orders. "Amara, can we talk privately?" she asked, closing my office door behind her. The careful way she spoke, the way she avoided eye contact, sent an immediate chill down my spine. "Of course. What's wrong? You look like someone died." Jenny sat down, heavily in the chair across from my desk, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. There are rumors circulating about Dale and Sophia." Sophia Blake. 23 years old, hired 8 months ago as Dale's executive assistant fresh out of graduate school. Brilliant. Ambitious and admittedly beautiful in that effortless way that made other women both envious and protective. I'd actually recommended her for the position after being impressed by her interview and credentials. She had an MBA from Stanford, spoke 3 languages, and had the kind of sharp analytical mind that reminded me of myself at that age. "What kind of rumors?" I asked, though something deep in my stomach was already twisting into knots. Jenny pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled. "Someone saw them at Chez Laurent last Friday night. The Friday you were in Portland for the Henderson account presentation. Chez Laurent, the intimate French restaurant where Dale had taken me for our anniversary just 6 months earlier. Where he'd told me he loved watching me negotiate deals because I was terrifyingly brilliant and utterly beautiful at the same time. Jenny, that could be anything. Maybe they were discussing work or Amara. She turned her phone toward me, and my world tilted off its axis. The photo was grainy, clearly taken from across the restaurant by someone's cell phone, but unmistakable. Dale, leaning across a candlelit table, his hand covering Sophia's. She was wearing the red dress I'd complimented her on earlier that week. He was wearing the tie I'd bought him for his birthday. They weren't looking at documents or laptops. They were looking at each other the way Dale used to look at me. The way I thought he still looked at me. "There are more," Jenny said quietly, swiping to show me additional photos. Dale's hand on Sophia's lower back as they left the restaurant. The two of them walking to his car. Our car, the BMW we'd chosen together last Christmas. A kiss that looked nothing like a professional goodbye. I stared at the images, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. This was Dale. My Dale. The man who'd held my hair when I had food poisoning during our honeymoon. Who'd stayed up all night helping me prepare for my first board presentation. Who'd cried with me when we'd decided not to have children, choosing, instead, to pour our parental energy into mentoring young professionals. Like Sophia. When were these taken? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, distant and hollow. Last Friday night. But Amara, there's more. Someone from accounting mentioned seeing them at the Marriott downtown last Thursday during lunch. And Lisa from marketing said she saw Sophia leaving Dale's office at 8 p.m. last Tuesday with her hair messed up and her lipstick gone. The timeline was forming, and with it, a sickening realization. All those late meetings Dale had been having, all those urgent operational issues that required evening discussions, all those times he'd come home smelling like unfamiliar perfume, which he'd explained away as new air fresheners in the conference rooms. I'd believed him. I'd believed every excuse, every explanation, every reassurance that his increased workload was just the pressure of positioning himself for the CEO role. I'd even felt proud of his dedication, impressed by his commitment to the company we'd both given our lives to. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Jenny's expression told me everything. "The rumors started about 3 months ago. But Amara, you need to know, it's not just the affair. There's talk that Dale has been positioning Sophia for a major promotion. Some people think he's planning to bring her with him if he gets the CEO position. The conference room, the quarterly projections I'd just finished presenting." I suddenly remembered the way Dale had looked at Sophia during the meeting, the subtle nod he'd given her when she'd made a suggestion about market penetration strategies, the way she'd smiled back, confident and knowing. I'd attributed it to good mentorship, professional development, the kind of collaborative environment Dale and I had always fostered. Instead, I'd been watching my husband groom his replacement, in more ways than one. The next few hours passed in a surreal haze. I sat through 2 more meetings, smiled at appropriate moments, contributed to strategic discussions, all while feeling like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Every interaction with Dale felt loaded with new meaning. Every time I saw Sophia in the hallway, I wondered what she knew, what she thought of me, whether she felt any guilt at all about destroying a 20-year marriage. By 4 p.m., I couldn't pretend anymore. I needed air, I needed space. I needed to figure out how to breathe in a world where everything I'd believed about my life was suddenly, catastrophically wrong. I grabbed my coat and purse, told my assistant I was feeling unwell, and walked out of Meridian Technologies without a backward glance. The rain had stopped, but the Seattle streets were still slick and gray, mirroring the storm that was building inside my chest. I had no idea that this walk, this desperate attempt to clear my head and process the destruction of my marriage, would lead me to an encounter that would change everything. That in my darkest moment, I was about to stumble into the opportunity of a lifetime. Sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of timing. Sometimes your worst day becomes the first day of your real life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The coffee shop I found myself in was one of those small, family-owned places that somehow managed to survive in downtown Seattle, despite being surrounded by Starbucks on every corner. The Grindhouse had been my sanctuary during the early days at Meridian, back when I was just another ambitious 20-something trying to prove herself in a male-dominated industry. The owner, Mrs. Patterson, still remembered how I liked my coffee, dark roast, 2 sugars, no cream. Sitting in the corner booth where I'd once studied for my MBA exams, I tried to piece together how I'd gotten here. How the woman who'd once been featured on the cover of Business Weekly as one of Seattle's rising stars was now staring at photos of her husband cheating with someone young enough to be our daughter. I hadn't always been a Mara Richardson, successful executive and corporate power player. 25 years ago, I was a Mara Santos, the first person in my family to graduate college. My parents, Miguel and Carmen Santos, had immigrated from the Philippines when I was 3 years old. My father worked 2 jobs, days at Boeing's manufacturing plant, evenings cleaning office buildings downtown. My mother took in sewing and watched neighbors' children to help make ends meet. They'd sacrificed everything so I could have opportunities they'd never dreamed of. When I received my scholarship to the University of Washington, my mother cried for 3 days straight. Not from sadness, but from pure, overwhelming pride. "Mija," she'd whispered, holding my acceptance letter like it was made of gold. "You're going to change our family's story." And I had. By 25, I had my MBA and a junior analyst position at Meridian Technologies. By 30, I was managing my own accounts. By 35, I was heading up entire strategic initiatives. I'd bought my parents a house, paid off their debts, and sent my younger brother Bobby through engineering school. I'd achieved everything I'd dreamed of and more. Meeting Dale during graduate school had felt like destiny. He was from a different world, 3rd-generation American, family money, prep school background, but he saw past the differences. He loved my drive, my hunger, my refusal to accept limitations. I loved his steady confidence, his natural leadership abilities, and the way he made me feel like I belonged in rooms where I was often the only woman, the only person of color, the only one whose parents didn't speak English as their first language. We complemented each other perfectly. Dale had the connections and the inherent credibility that came with his background. I had the innovative thinking and relentless work ethic that came from knowing what it meant to have nothing. Together, we climbed the corporate ladder not as competitors, but as partners. Our colleagues at Meridian often marveled at our dynamic. In board meetings, we functioned like a well-choreographed dance. Dale would present the operational framework, I'd outline the strategic vision, and together we'd field questions with the kind of synchronized precision that made deals close and projects succeed. Marcus Whitmore himself had once commented that hiring us was like getting 2 executives for the price of 2, but with the productivity of 4. The early years of our marriage were a whirlwind of late nights, ambitious projects, and shared victories. We celebrated each other's promotions with the same enthusiasm most couples reserved for anniversaries. When I landed the Henderson account, worth $50 million annually, Dale took me to Paris for a long weekend. When he successfully negotiated the European expansion that saved the company $30 million in operating costs, I surprised him with tickets to the World Series. We'd chosen not to have children after years of careful consideration. It wasn't that we didn't want them exactly. It was more that we'd poured all our parental energy into our careers, into mentoring younger colleagues, into building something larger than ourselves. Meridian Technologies became our baby, our legacy, our shared purpose. Or so I'd believed. Looking back now, I could see the signs I'd missed, the gradual shift in our dynamic over the past year. Dale had started making decisions without consulting me, presenting strategies in meetings that we hadn't discussed at home. He'd begun spending more time with Marcus Whitmore, positioning himself as the sole successor rather than part of our partnership. I'd attributed it to the natural evolution of his role as VP of Operations. His responsibilities had expanded. His visibility with the board had increased, and everyone knew he was being groomed for the top position. I'd been proud of his advancement, secure in my own career trajectory, confident that his success was our success. The irony was devastating. I'd spent months encouraging Dale to pursue the CEO position more aggressively. I'd helped him prepare for crucial presentations, coached him through difficult board meetings, even suggested he take on higher-profile projects that would showcase his leadership capabilities. I'd been his biggest champion, his strategic advisor, his unwavering supporter, all while he was building a completely different future with Sophia Blake. Mrs. Patterson approached my table with a concerned expression, carrying a fresh cup of coffee I hadn't ordered. "You look like you've seen a ghost, dear. Everything all right?" I managed a weak smile. "Just work stress, Mrs. Patterson. Nothing a good cup of coffee can't help." She patted my shoulder gently. "You know, I've been watching you come in here for over 20 years. I've seen you celebrate promotions, survive layoff scares, and work through more all-nighters than any person should. But I've never seen you look quite like this." Her kindness almost broke me. This woman had witnessed my entire professional journey, had provided caffeine and encouragement through countless challenges, had become an unexpected fixture in my success story. She'd never met Dale. He preferred the more upscale coffee shops near the financial district, but she'd heard about him in my updates over the years. "Sometimes life surprises you," I said quietly. "Not always in good ways." Mrs. Patterson nodded knowingly. "My Harold cheated on me back in '78. Thought my world was ending. Turned out to be the beginning of the best chapter of my life. Sometimes, the universe has to push us off one path before we can find the right one." I stared at her, struck by the simple wisdom of her words. Here I was, devastated by what felt like the end of everything, and she was suggesting it might be a beginning. My phone buzzed with a text from Dale. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." The casual lie, sent while I sat here knowing the truth, sparked something inside me. Not just anger, but a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. For too long, I'd defined myself in terms of our partnership, our shared goals, our combined success. I'd forgotten who Amara Santos had been before she became half of a power couple. I'd forgotten that the woman who'd clawed her way out of poverty, who'd earned every opportunity through sheer determination, who'd changed her family's entire trajectory through hard work and strategic thinking, that woman didn't need anyone else's validation or partnership to succeed. That woman had built herself from nothing once before. She could do it again. As I sat in that familiar coffee shop, surrounded by the aroma of fresh beans and the quiet hum of other people's conversations, I began to remember who I'd been before Dale, before the marriage, before I'd started measuring my worth through someone else's achievements. I remembered the young woman who'd walked into Meridian Technologies with more ambition than experience, more dreams than connections, and had refused to accept anything less than excellence. The woman who'd earned respect not through family names or inherited advantages, but through results, innovation, and an unshakable belief in her own capabilities. That woman was still here, somewhere beneath the shock and betrayal. And she was getting angrier by the minute. I finished my coffee, left a generous tip for Mrs. Patterson, and stepped back onto Seattle's busy streets. The late afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows between the skyscrapers. I had no destination in mind, just a need to keep walking, to let my mind process everything that had changed in the span of a few hours. I had no idea that this aimless walk would lead me to the encounter that would transform my life. That in my moment of greatest vulnerability, I was about to meet the person who would hand me the keys to everything Dale had ever wanted. Walking through downtown Seattle in a daze, I found myself standing in front of the building that housed Titan Industries, Meridian's biggest competitor in the Pacific Northwest tech market. The irony wasn't lost on me. In my moment of personal crisis, I'd unconsciously gravitated toward the one company that represented everything Dale and I had worked against for the past decade. Titan Industries was the tech giant that had tried to poach both Dale and me multiple times over the years. Their CEO, Harrison Reed, was a legendary figure in Seattle business circles, the kind of man who'd built an empire from nothing and commanded respect from competitors and allies alike. We'd crossed paths at industry events, always maintaining professional courtesy despite our company's rivalry. The October wind was picking up, cutting through my blazer and reminding me that I'd left the office without my coat. I should have gone home, should have confronted Dale, should have done any number of rational things. Instead, I stood there, staring up at the gleaming Titan building, feeling more lost than I had since my father died 5 years earlier. Ms. Santos? The voice behind me was familiar, though I couldn't immediately place it. I turned to see Harrison Reed himself approaching from the direction of the building's parking garage. Even at 62, he cut an impressive figure. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that commanded attention in any room. He was carrying a leather briefcase and looked like he'd just finished a long day of meetings. "It's Richardson." "Now," I corrected automatically, then felt a stab of pain at my own words. Was it still Richardson? Would it be much longer? Harrison's keen eyes took in my disheveled appearance, the way I was standing aimlessly on the sidewalk, the obvious distress I was trying to hide. "Are you all right? You look like you've had quite a day." I almost laughed at the understatement. "You could say that." I gestured vaguely at his building. "I was just thinking. Sometimes you need to walk somewhere that makes you see things differently." He nodded thoughtfully. "I do my best thinking on these streets, too. 25 years I've been walking these blocks, working through problems, making decisions that shaped everything." He paused, studying my face. "Would you like to get some coffee? There's a place around the corner that actually has decent espresso, not the burnt offering most places try to pass off." Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. Harrison Reed was the competition, the enemy, the man who'd spent years trying to steal Meridian's market share and top talent. Having coffee with him would be professional suicide if Dale found out, but Dale was with Sophia. Dale had been lying to me for months. Dale had made his choices, and maybe it was time I started making mine. "Coffee sounds perfect," I heard myself say. The cafe Harrison led me to was a small Italian place I'd never noticed, despite working in the area for over 2 decades. The owner greeted Harrison by name, and I realized this wasn't a random suggestion. This was his regular spot, his thinking place, just like the grindhouse had been mine. We settled into a corner table, and Harrison ordered us both espresso, without asking what I wanted. Somehow, he'd guessed correctly. The strong, bitter coffee was exactly what I needed. "So," he said after we'd sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, "what brings Meridian's star strategist to stand outside my building looking like her world just fell apart?" I should have deflected, should have given some vague answer about work stress or personal matters. Instead, something about his direct approach and genuine concern made me want to tell the truth. "I found out today that my husband is having an affair with his 23-year-old assistant." The words came out flat, matter of fact, like I was reporting quarterly earnings. Harrison's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Dale Richardson," he said quietly. It wasn't a question, you know? "I know a lot of things about my competitors, Amara. May I call you Amara?" When I nodded, he continued, "I know that you're the real strategic mind behind Meridian's success. Over the past decade, I know that Dale gets credit for initiatives that have your fingerprints all over them, and I know that you've been undervalued and overlooked for far too long. The accuracy of his assessment hit me like a physical blow. How could you possibly know that? Harrison smiled ruefully. Because I've been trying to recruit you for 8 years. Every time I've approached you, you've turned me down out of loyalty to your husband and your company. But I've done my homework, Amara. I know which strategies came from your mind, which deals were closed because of your relationships, which innovations kept Meridian competitive in a market they should have lost years ago. I stared at him. My espresso forgotten. Why are you telling me this? Because 24 hours ago, I announced my retirement to my board of directors. I'm 62 years old. I've built everything I wanted to build, and I'm ready to step back. But I'm not ready to hand over my life's work to just anyone. The conversation felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. What does this have to do with me? Harrison leaned forward, his intensity palpable. I need a successor, Amara. Not just someone to maintain what I've built, but someone who can take Titan to the next level. Someone with vision, strategic brilliance, and the hunger to prove themselves. Someone who's been held back by other people's limitations and is ready to show the world what they're really capable of. My heart was racing. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you my company. The words hung in the air between us. I felt like I was in free fall, like everything solid in my world had given way, and I was tumbling through space with no idea where I might land. Harrison, I can't. I work for Meridian. Dale is about to become CEO. My entire life is tied up in that company. Is it? His question was gentle but pointed. Tell me, when Dale becomes CEO, what happens to you? Do you think he'll promote the wife he's betraying? Do you think Sophia Blake is going to be content being just his assistant when she could be his strategic partner in both business and pleasure? The truth of his words hit me like ice water. I'd been so focused on the personal betrayal that I hadn't fully considered the professional implications. Dale wasn't just replacing me in his bed. He was positioning to replace me in the boardroom too. The board meeting is next week, Harrison continued. They're announcing the succession plan. I've been told Dale Richardson is the presumptive choice, with significant changes expected in the strategic development department. Changes? My voice was barely a whisper. New leadership, younger perspectives, a fresh approach to market penetration. He didn't need to spell it out. They were going to push me out. I sat back in my chair, the full scope of my situation finally becoming clear. Dale hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been systematically removing me from the equation, both personally and professionally. While I'd been supporting his advancement, he'd been orchestrating my departure. I need to think, I said weakly. Harrison reached into his briefcase and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. This is my private number. The board meets Thursday morning to finalize my succession plan. If you're interested in discussing this further, call me before then. He stood to leave, then paused. Amara, I've spent my entire career studying what makes people successful. You have something that can't be taught, can't be faked, and can't be replaced. Don't let anyone convince you that you're not capable of extraordinary things. As he walked away, I stared at the business card in my hands. On the front was his standard contact information. On the back, he'd written, Sometimes the best revenge is massive success. HR. I sat in that small Italian cafe for another hour, watching the Seattle business district transition from day to evening, watching people hurry past the windows toward their normal lives while mine lay in ruins around me. But for the first time since Jenny had shown me those devastating photos, I wasn't just thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I might gain. The woman who'd built herself from nothing was still here, still strong, still capable of extraordinary things. Maybe it was time to remind the world, and myself, of exactly what Amara Santos could accomplish when she stopped limiting herself to someone else's vision of her future. My phone buzzed with another text from Dale. "Dinner meeting running late. Go ahead and eat without me." I looked at the message, then at Harrison's business card, then back at the message. For the first time in 20 years of marriage, I didn't feel hurt by Dale's absence. I felt liberated by it. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of timing. But maybe Mrs. Patterson had been right. Maybe sometimes you had to be pushed off one path before you could find the right one. I slipped Harrison's card into my purse and stepped back into the Seattle evening, no longer aimless, no longer lost. I had thinking to do, plans to make, and a future to design. And for the first time in years, that future belonged entirely to me. The drive home from downtown Seattle felt like traveling through a parallel universe. Everything looked the same: the familiar tree-lined streets of Bellevue, the manicured lawns of our upscale neighborhood, the contemporary house Dale and I had bought 3 years ago as a symbol of our success. But I was seeing it all with different eyes, weighing everything against possibilities I'd never dared to imagine. Our house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that Dale had insisted on because they made the place look executive level. The perfectly landscaped garden, the 3-car garage with his BMW, my Mercedes, and the vintage Porsche he'd bought himself for his 40th birthday. Everything screamed success, stability, the American dream achieved through hard work and smart decisions. Everything except the marriage that had paid for it all. I sat in my car for 10 minutes after pulling into the driveway, Harrison's business card burning a hole in my purse. The logical part of my brain was cataloging all the reasons his offer was impossible. I had 22 years invested at Meridian. I had stock options that wouldn't vest for another 3 years. I had relationships, reputation, a carefully built career that couldn't just be abandoned on a whim. But the other part of my brain, the part that remembered being Amara Santos, the woman who'd taken impossible risks and made them pay off, was doing different calculations. What did I really have at Meridian? A husband who was actively working to replace me? A strategic development position that would likely be eliminated the moment Dale took over? Stock options in a company that would no longer value my contributions? The house was dark when I finally went inside. Dale's note was stuck to the refrigerator. Late dinner meeting with the Tokyo team. Might not be back until morning. You know how these international deals go. Love you. I read the note 3 times, looking for any hint of guilt, any crack in his perfect facade of normalcy. There was nothing. Just the casual lie of a man who'd gotten so comfortable with deception that he'd stopped bothering to make it believable. Tokyo team. At 6 p.m. Seattle time, it would be 10 a.m. in Tokyo. Hardly dinner time. But it was prime time for an intimate evening with Sophia Blake. I walked through our house, really seeing it for the first time in months. The living room with its expensive furniture and carefully curated art collection. The kitchen where we'd hosted dinner parties for Meridian colleagues, celebrating deals and promotions and shared victories. The home office where we'd worked side by side on countless presentations, our laptops open on the large oak desk, strategizing our way through complex negotiations. Everything was a lie. Or rather, everything had been real once, but I'd been living in the past while Dale built a different future. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good Cabernet we'd been saving for a special occasion, and sat at our kitchen island with Harrison's business card. The weight of the decision before me was overwhelming. Taking over Titan Industries wouldn't just be a career move, it would be a complete transformation of my life. It would mean leaving everything familiar, everything safe, everything I'd built, with Dale. It would also mean betting everything on myself. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Bobby's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, sis." My brother's voice was warm with affection. "How's the corporate world treating you?" Bobby was the only person who still called me by my maiden name sometimes. The only one who remembered Amara Santos, before she became part of the Richardson power couple. At 38, he was a successful structural engineer with his own firm, married to his college sweetheart Angela, father to 2 beautiful daughters who called me Tita Amara and filled my life with joy whenever I visited. "It's been an interesting day," I said, not sure how much I was ready to share. Uh-oh. That tone usually means either you landed a huge deal or something went very wrong. Which is it? I found myself telling him everything. About the photos, about Dale's betrayal, about Harrison's impossible offer. Bobby listened without interrupting, occasionally making sympathetic sounds or muttering curses in Tagalog that would have made our mother scold him. Jesus, Amara. I never liked that guy, but I never thought he'd be stupid enough to cheat on you. You never liked Dale? This was news to me. Bobby was quiet for a moment. He was always dismissive. At family gatherings, he'd find ways to steer conversations away from your achievements and toward his own. Remember when you closed that Henderson deal? At Mom and Dad's anniversary party, he spent the whole night talking about his European expansion project instead of celebrating your success. I did remember. I'd attributed it to Dale's excitement about his own work, but now I saw it differently. He'd been systematically minimizing my accomplishments, even in front of my own family. But that's not the important part, Bobby continued. The important part is this Harrison Reed guy. You said he's been trying to recruit you for 8 years? On and off. I always turned him down. Because of Dale. Because of loyalty. Because I thought we were building something together. Amara, listen to me. You're the smartest person I know. You're also the most capable person I know. But you've spent so long being half of a couple that you've forgotten what you're capable of on your own. His words hit harder than Harrison's offer had. Bobby was right. I'd become comfortable in the role of strategic partner, content to share credit and recognition, happy to be part of something bigger than myself. But I'd forgotten that I'd been something impressive all on my own before Dale ever came into the picture. What if I fail? The question escaped before I could stop it. What if you don't? Bobby shot back. Amara, you remember what Papa used to say? Ang hindi marunong lumingon sa pinanggalingan ay hindi makararating sa paroroonan. Those who do not know how to look back at where they came from will never get to their destination. Our father's favorite proverb. I'd heard it countless times growing up, usually when one of us was complaining about hard work or taking shortcuts. Papa had lived by those words, never forgetting that his success in America was built on the sacrifices of everyone who came before him. You know where you came from, sis. You know what you're capable of. Maybe it's time to remember. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my perfect house, thinking about sacrifice and commitment. If I took Harrison's offer, I'd be walking, away from everything Dale and I had built together. But what we'd built was already gone, destroyed by his choices and his lies. The real question was, what was I willing to sacrifice to build something new? I opened my laptop and began researching everything I could find about Titan Industries. Their market position, their recent acquisitions, their corporate structure, their weaknesses and opportunities. If I was going to consider this seriously, I needed to understand exactly what Harrison was offering. The more I read, the more excited I became. Titan had solid fundamentals but lacked the innovative strategic vision that had made Meridian competitive. They were profitable but not growing, stable but not dynamic. With the right leadership, the right strategic initiatives, they could dominate the Pacific Northwest tech market within 5 years. I could see it clearly. The moves I'd make, the partnerships I'd forge, the talent I'd recruit. For the first time in months, I felt the familiar thrill of strategic thinking, the rush of seeing possibilities where others saw obstacles. By midnight, I'd filled a legal pad with notes and ideas. I'd researched Harrison's background, studied Titan's financials, and mapped out a preliminary vision for the company's future. I'd also made a list of everything I'd be giving up and everything I'd be gaining. The sacrifice column was long: my marriage, my position at Meridian, 22 years of professional relationships, the security of the known. The commitment column was longer: complete ownership of my career, unlimited potential for growth, the chance to prove what I could accomplish when nobody else got the credit. At 1 a.m., Dale's key turned in the front door. I closed my laptop and slipped Harrison's business card back into my purse. Dale appeared in the kitchen doorway, loosening his tie, his hair slightly mussed in a way that confirmed exactly where he'd been. "You're up late," he said, moving to the refrigerator without looking at me directly. "Couldn't sleep. How was your dinner meeting?" "Productive. Tokyo deals are always complicated." The lie came so easily that I wondered how long he'd been practicing it. I watched him pour himself a glass of milk, the picture of domestic normalcy, and felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no disappointment. Just a cold clarity that told me I'd already made my decision. "I'm going to bed," I said, standing up. "I'll be up in a few minutes," he replied, but we both knew that was another lie. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I thought about commitment. Dale had committed to a different future, one that didn't include me. Now it was time for me to make a commitment of my own. Tomorrow, I would call Harrison Reed. Tomorrow, I would bet everything on the woman I'd forgotten I could be. Tonight, I would sleep better than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm for the first time in months. Dale was already gone, another early workout, according to the note he'd left on his pillow, but I suspected his fitness routine had more to do with Sophia's schedule than his health goals. The thought should have hurt, but instead it felt like confirmation that I was making the right choice. I made coffee in our pristine kitchen, the same routine I'd followed for years, but everything felt different. The expensive espresso machine Dale had insisted we needed, the marble countertops we'd debated for weeks, the breakfast nook where we used to read the Wall Street Journal together. It all felt like props in someone else's play. Harrison's business card sat next to my coffee cup, his private number a lifeline to a future I was still afraid to fully imagine. The board meeting was tomorrow. 24 hours to decide whether to bet everything on myself or continue pretending my marriage and career weren't already over. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. "Can we talk before you come in? Something you need to know. The urgency." In her message sent a chill down my spine. I called her immediately. "Amara, thank God." Jenny's voice was strained. "I didn't want you to walk in blind. There's a meeting this morning. Marcus, Dale, and some of the board members. They're discussing organizational restructuring and strategic development." The euphemism hit me like a physical blow. Organizational restructuring, the corporate equivalent of a death sentence. When? 9:30. Dale specifically requested that you not be included because it might involve sensitive personnel decisions that could create conflicts of interest. Of course he had. Dale was positioning my removal as a kindness, protecting me from the uncomfortable details of my own professional execution. The efficiency of it was almost admirable. He was eliminating his wife and clearing the path for his mistress in one calculated move. "Jenny, I need you to do me a favor. Can you schedule a meeting for me at 10:30 this morning? Off-site, highly confidential." "With who?" I took a deep breath. "Harrison Reed." The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, Jenny whispered, "Amara, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life." 2 hours later, I sat across from Harrison in a private dining room at the Four Seasons, the same hotel where Meridian had celebrated its 20th anniversary just 6 months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "You look different," Harrison observed, studying my face across the white linen tablecloth. "More focused." "I spent the night thinking about what you said. about what I'm capable of when I stop limiting myself to someone else's vision. Harrison nodded approvingly. And what conclusion did you reach? That I've been undervaluing myself for years, that I've been so comfortable being part of a partnership that I forgot what I could accomplish on my own. I leaned forward, feeling the familiar thrill of negotiation. But I have conditions. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. I pulled out the legal pad I'd filled with notes the night before. First, I want to understand exactly what you're offering. Complete control of operations? Strategic decision-making authority? Or am I just going to be another highly paid employee with a fancy title? Harrison smiled. You're talking about buying the company, Amara, not just running it. Buying it. The words hit me like an electric shock. I don't have that kind of capital. You don't need it. I've structured this as a leveraged buyout with performance-based payments. You put up a small initial investment, within your means, and the company pays for itself through improved performance. If you can grow Titan's revenue by 30% over 3 years, you own it outright. If not, I maintain controlling interest, but you still earn significant equity. My mind raced through the implications. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a chance to own my own destiny completely. No board of directors to answer to, no husband to share credit with, no glass ceiling to bump against. Second condition, I continued, trying to keep my voice steady. I want to bring key people with me. There are talented individuals at Meridian who are being overlooked because they don't fit Dale's vision of the future, such as Denver Walsh in business development. He's brilliant with client relationships, but Dale thinks he's too aggressive. Angela Park in marketing. She has innovative ideas that get shot down because they're too risky. Archie Thompson in finance, who sees opportunities everyone else misses. Harrison made notes as I spoke. You're talking about poaching your husband's staff. I'm talking about giving talented people opportunities they'll never get at Meridian, especially once Dale brings in his own team, which presumably includes Ms. Blake. The directness of his question caught me off guard, but I appreciated it. Sophia will likely be promoted to a strategic role she's not qualified for. Dale has been positioning her for months, giving her credit for work she didn't do, including her in meetings above her level. And how do you know she's not qualified? I pulled out my phone and showed him several emails. Because I've been watching her work for 8 months. She's smart, ambitious, and excellent at managing up, but she lacks the depth of experience for strategic decision-making. These are proposals she submitted that I quietly corrected before they went to clients. Harrison reviewed the emails, his expression growing more serious. This is extensive work. I've been covering for her mistakes without realizing it. I thought I was mentoring a promising young professional. I was actually protecting Dale's mistress from the consequences of her incompetence. The admission stung, but it also clarified something important. I hadn't just been betrayed personally. I'd been manipulated professionally, tricked into enabling my own replacement with someone who couldn't actually do the job. Third condition, I said, putting my phone away. I want this transition to be clean and professional. No publics. Drama. No corporate warfare. I'll serve out my notice at Meridian, transition my accounts properly, and leave with my reputation intact. Even though they're planning to fire you, especially because they're planning to fire me, taking the high road will make their behavior look even worse by comparison. Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying me with new respect. You're not just thinking about revenge, are you? You're thinking about legacy. My parents taught me that how you leave a place matters as much as how you arrive. I won't let Dale and Sophia rewrite history by making me look bitter or unprofessional. We spent the next hour discussing details, timelines, transition plans, the specific terms of the buyout agreement. Harrison had clearly been planning this for months, maybe years. Every question I asked had been anticipated, every potential obstacle addressed. One final question, I said as we prepared to leave. Why me? You could hire any number of experienced CEOs. Why take a chance on someone who's never run a company? Harrison's answer was immediate. Because you're hungry. Because you have something to prove. Because you've been held back by other people's limitations for so long that you're ready to explode with potential. He paused. And because the best leaders aren't the ones who've never failed. They're the ones who've been knocked down and gotten back up stronger. As I drove back to Meridian, my phone rang. Dale's name appeared on the screen. Hey, sweetheart. His voice was casual, unguarded. How's your morning going? The normalcy of his tone, the casual endearment, the complete absence of guilt. It was almost breathtaking in its audacity. Fine, I replied evenly. Productive meetings. You? Same. Listen, I might be late again tonight. The Tokyo situation is getting complicated. Another lie, delivered with the same ease as asking about the weather. Of course, I said. I understand. But I didn't understand. I didn't understand how someone could destroy a 20-year marriage with such casual indifference. I didn't understand how he could look at me every morning and pretend we still had a future together. I didn't understand how I'd been blind to this side of him for so long. What I did understand was that I was done trying to understand. Done making excuses, done enabling his deception, done limiting my own potential to preserve a relationship that existed only in my imagination. As I pulled into the Meridian parking garage, I saw Dale's BMW in his reserved spot. Sophia's Honda was parked 3 spaces away, close enough for convenience, far enough to maintain plausible deniability. The sight should have triggered anger or hurt. Instead, it triggered determination. Tonight, I would call Harrison and accept his offer. Tomorrow, after Dale's board meeting eliminated my position, I would submit my resignation letter and begin the most important chapter of my professional life. But first, I had one more day of pretending everything was normal. One more day of being the loyal wife and dedicated employee while planning the move that would change everything. The warning signs were everywhere now, in Dale's careless lies, in the emergency meetings I wasn't invited to, in the way Sophia smiled at me. In the hallway, like she knew a secret I didn't. But they weren't warning me away from danger anymore. They were warning me toward opportunity. The morning of the board meeting arrived with unseasonable warmth for October in Seattle. I dressed carefully, choosing my navy Armani suit, the one Dale had complimented when I'd worn it to close the Bow Henderson deal. If this was going to be my last day as Amara Richardson of Meridian Technologies, I wanted to look like the executive I'd worked 22 years to become. Dale had left before dawn, claiming he needed to prepare for important presentations. No kiss goodbye, no acknowledgement that this day might be significant for both of us. Just another casual dismissal in what had become a pattern of treating me like a roommate rather than a wife. I arrived at the office early, wanting to observe the dynamics before the formal massacre began. The executive floor had an unusual energy, the kind of contained excitement that preceded major announcements. At 9:15, I watched through my office window as board members arrived. Dale appeared in the lobby at 9:25, looking perfectly composed in his charcoal suit and red tie. Sophia walked beside him, not quite close enough to seem inappropriate, but close enough to send a message to anyone paying attention. My phone rang. Marcus Whitmore's name appeared on the screen. Amara, could you join me in my office? There's something I'd like to discuss before the board meeting. This wasn't part of the script Dale had written. Marcus was supposed to deliver my professional death sentence after the meeting, not before. Marcus was standing by his windows when I arrived. Sit down, please. His tone was formal, but not unkind. Marcus, if this is about the strategic development restructuring, he held up a hand to stop. Amara, I've known you for over 20 years. I also know that some of my executives have been making assumptions about your future with this company. Assumptions that may not align with reality. Marcus returned to his desk and opened a thick folder containing detailed analyses of every major strategic initiative from the past 5 years. Color-coded charts showing which ideas originated from which executives, which implementations succeeded, which relationships drove key deals. According to this analysis, 68% of our successful strategic initiatives over the past 3 years originated from your department. Dale's operational implementations were solid, but the underlying strategies were yours. My phone buzzed with a text from Dale. Meeting starting early. Big announcements coming. Love you. The casual cruelty of his message, sent while he prepared to eliminate my job, was breathtaking. Marcus, I need to tell you something, I began. But he interrupted. Before you say anything, I want you to know that Dale's reorganization proposal has been rejected by the board. Furthermore, I'm recommending a different kind of restructuring, one that recognizes actual performance rather than office politics. I'm offering you Dale's job, Amara, Executive Vice President of Strategic Operations, with a clear path to CEO succession. The offer hung in the air between us like a live wire. 6 months ago, this would have been my dream come true. Now it felt like a trap. I need to think about this, I said carefully. The board meeting that Dale had expected to be his coronation lasted exactly 47 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my computer screen, counting down the minutes until his world would shift as dramatically as mine had yesterday. Jenny knocked on my door at 10:23 a.m. with a printout of an email sent to all senior staff. Organizational Restructuring, Strategic Development Division. Dale Richardson would continue as Vice President of Operational Management. A new position had been created, Executive Vice President of Strategic Operations. The new EVP would be announced by Friday, pending final discussions with the candidate, Dale. Must be losing his mind right now, Jenny whispered. As if summoned by her words, Dale's voice carried down the hallway, strained, desperate. My phone buzzed with a text from him. Need to talk. Something's gone wrong with the succession plan. Can you meet me for lunch? For the first time in our 20-year marriage, Dale was asking for my help instead of assuming it would be available. Walked to the break room, deliberately passing Dale's office. Through his open door, I could see him pacing behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear. Sophia sat across from him, her usual confident posture replaced by tension. In the break room, Denver Walsh was making his 3rd cup of coffee. Hell of a morning, he said. You hear about the reorganization? Denver lowered his voice. People are saying Dale completely misread the board's priorities. Word is Marcus had data. Serious data about who's actually been driving strategy. Around here? You know what's really interesting? Denver continued. 3 different people told me they saw Dale and Sophia at that expensive restaurant in Bellevue last week, at 8 p.m. on a Saturday, while you were in Portland for the Henderson presentation. The timeline hit me like ice water. I'd been working overnight to secure our biggest client relationship, while Dale was having romantic dinners with his assistant. Denver, are you telling me this as a friend or as a colleague? As someone who thinks you deserve better than what you've been getting, both personally and professionally. At 2:15, Dale entered my office looking disheveled, his tie askew, stress lines around his eyes. Amara, we need to talk. Something's happening that I don't understand. The board meeting didn't go as expected? It was a disaster. Marcus had all this data about strategic initiatives, about who was really driving what projects. He made it sound like I've been taking credit for other people's work. The complaint was so tone-deaf, so completely lacking in self-awareness, that I almost laughed. Have you been taking credit for other people's work? Dale became defensive. Leadership means taking responsibility for your team's output. But Marcus seemed to think the initiatives were coming from specific individuals, not the department as a whole. Dale stared at me, something shifting in his expression. You're not surprised by any of this, are you? The suspicion in his voice, was new and dangerous. Dale was finally starting to realize that he might not be the only one with secrets. I had no idea Marcus was conducting performance audits, I said, which was technically true, but I could see in Dale's eyes that he was beginning to suspect there were things I wasn't telling him. The hunter was finally realizing he might also be the prey. The silence stretched until Dale's phone buzzed with a text. I caught a glimpse of Sophia's name before he turned it face down. Even in his moment of professional crisis, he was still coordinating with his mistress. Maybe we should have dinner tonight, just the two of us. Reconnect, Dale said. After months of fake Tokyo meetings and mysterious late nights, now he wanted to reconnect. I actually have plans tonight, I said. Jenny and I are having drinks. Plans? With who? The possessiveness in his voice surprised me. Since when do you and Jenny have drinks on weeknights? Since I realized I've been neglecting my friendships. It's important to maintain relationships outside of work and marriage. After Dale left looking unsettled, I called Jenny for intelligence gathering. Meet me at the Grindhouse at 5:30, and bring anyone else from the office who might want to discuss today's developments. At 5:30, Jenny had assembled quite a group. Denver Walsh, Angela Park from marketing, and Archie Thompson from finance, the talented individuals who'd been consistently overlooked by Dale's vision of the future. Anyone want to tell me what the hell happened in that boardroom today? Denver asked. Marcus Whitmore happened, Angela replied. Apparently he's been keeping track of who actually does what around here. About time, Archie muttered. I've been sending Dale detailed financial analyses for 3 years, and he presents them like he discovered the trends himself. It's not just taking credit, Angela said. It's actively suppressing innovation. Last month, I proposed a digital marketing initiative that could have increased client engagement by 40%. Dale killed it because it was too aggressive. He did the same thing to my customer retention analysis, Denver added. As I listened, I realized Dale hadn't just been betraying me personally. He'd been systematically stifling talent and innovation throughout the department. What if I told you there might be other opportunities available? I said carefully. The kind where talent gets recognized, innovation gets rewarded, and people get to build something meaningful instead of watching their ideas get stolen. Denver sat back. You're talking about Harrison Reed, aren't you? The conversation that followed was unlike any I'd had in my 22 years at Meridian. These weren't just colleagues complaining, they were strategic thinkers ready to break free. Angela pulled me aside as we prepared to leave. Dale approached me last week about joining his inner circle when he became CEO. But what I was really thinking was that his vision looked a lot like other people's work with his name on it. He made the same pitch to me, Denver added. Translation: do the work so he could take the credit. My phone rang as I drove home. Harrison Reed's name appeared on the screen. Good evening, Amara. Word travels fast in our industry. I heard Marcus Whitmore made some interesting organizational announcements today. Along with their teams? I asked when he mentioned recruiting talented executives. Especially along with their teams. If you decide to accept my offer, I'd want you to bring the people who share your vision. The allies were emerging, the chess pieces were moving, and Dale was finally beginning to understand that he might not be the only player in this game. The breakfast meeting with Harrison took place at a small bistro in Bellevue, far enough from downtown Seattle to avoid any chance encounters with Meridian colleagues. I arrived early, my mind still processing the revelations from the previous evening's gathering at the Grindhouse. Harrison was already seated at a corner table reading what appeared to be a detailed financial report. He looked up as I approached, his expression serious but satisfied. You look like someone who's had a productive evening, he observed, standing to greet me. You could say that. I'm beginning to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. We'd ordered coffee and settled into our conversation. Harrison opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Before we discuss your decision, I want to show you something that might influence your thinking. He slid the folder across the table. This is what Marcus Whitmore's audit revealed about Meridian's Strategic Development Department. I opened the folder to find detailed charts and graphs that went far beyond what Marcus had shown me in his office. This analysis included email metadata, meeting attendance records, project timelines, and even client feedback scores correlated with specific strategic initiatives. "How did you get this?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "The consulting firm Marcus hired? They're a subsidiary of a company I own. When they conduct competitive intelligence assessments, I sometimes receive supplementary reports." The implications were staggering. Harrison hadn't just been watching Meridian from the outside. He'd been conducting his own corporate espionage operation, documenting the performance patterns that would eventually help him recruit the talent he wanted. "This is comprehensive," I said, scanning through pages of data that painted a damning picture of Dale's leadership style. "Page 12 is particularly interesting," Harrison suggested. I flipped to a section titled Initiative Attribution Analysis. The chart showed a clear pattern: strategic ideas originating from various department members, being refined and developed through collaborative processes, then presented to upper management with Dale's name as primary contributor. But the most shocking revelation was on page 15, External Communications Monitoring. "You've been tracking Dale's communications?" I asked, staring at email logs and phone records. "Not directly. But when someone uses company resources for personal communications, and those communications involve potential conflicts of interest with strategic department personnel, it becomes relevant to competitive analysis." The logs showed months of after-hours communication between Dale and Sophia, including exchanges of strategic documents, meeting schedules, and what appeared to be coordination of Dale's presentation materials. There were also communications with other Meridian employees, the same people who'd been approached about joining Dale's inner circle. "This suggests he's been using Sophia as more than just an assistant," I said, though the words felt inadequate. "It suggests he's been running a shadow organization within Meridian, positioning himself to claim credit for departmental achievements, while building a loyal team that would follow him into executive leadership." My phone buzzed with a text from Dale. "Marcus wants to meet with me again this morning. Something about additional performance concerns. Do you know what this might be about?" The timing of his message, while I sat reviewing evidence of his systematic manipulation, felt like the universe's sense of irony at work. "I think Marcus might be conducting a follow-up review," I texted back, which was probably accurate. Harrison watched me respond to the message. "Your husband is about to have a very difficult conversation." "What do you mean?" "Marcus received his own copy of this analysis yesterday evening. He's discovering that his initial assessment was conservative. The scope of creative attribution in his strategic development department is more extensive than he realized." I thought about Dale's worried expression when he'd come home the previous night, his animated phone conversation, his growing suspicion that forces were moving beyond his control. "Harrison, I need to ask you something directly. Are you orchestrating Dale's downfall, or are you simply documenting it?" His answer was immediate and unflinching. "I'm documenting the natural consequences of poor leadership and unethical behavior. Dale Richardson created this situation through his own choices. I'm simply ensuring that talented people don't get buried in the rubble when his foundation collapses." The POW waiter refilled our coffee cups, and Harrison continued. "The question now is whether you want to stay and watch Meridian implode under the weight of Dale's mismanagement, or whether you want to help build something new with people who share your values." "What about my marriage?" Harrison's expression softened slightly. "Amara, your marriage ended months ago when Dale chose deception over honesty. You've been mourning a relationship that only existed in your imagination. The question is whether you're ready to stop pretending." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a group text from Jenny to several people, including me. "Emergency HR meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. All strategic development staff required to attend. Something about personnel policy compliance review. It's happening faster than I expected, Harrison observed, reading over my shoulder. What's happening? Dale's house of cards is collapsing. Marcus has clearly decided to address the attribution issues directly. That meeting isn't about policy compliance. It's about documenting who actually did what work before making personnel decisions. I stared at the text message, realizing that Dale's professional world was about to undergo the same devastating revelation that my personal world had experienced 3 days ago. I need to be there, I said, starting to stand. Harrison placed a gentle hand on my arm. Amara, you need to decide what role you want to play in this drama. Do you want to be the loyal wife who stands by her husband while he faces the consequences of his choices? Or do you want to be the strategic leader who protects talented people and builds something better? The choice crystallized in that moment. I could return to Meridian, attend the HR meeting, and watch Dale's carefully constructed facade crumble while pretending I didn't know about Sophia, about the stolen credit, about the systematic exploitation of our colleagues' talents. Or I could choose a different story entirely. If I accept your offer, how quickly could we move? Harrison smiled. I've had the paperwork ready for weeks. We could announce your appointment as CEO of Titan Industries by Monday morning. Your team could start transitioning immediately. And Dale? Dale will be dealing with the consequences of his own choices. Marcus Whitmore is nobody's fool, and he doesn't tolerate executives who treat their departments like personal intellectual property farms. I looked at my phone, at the emergency meeting notification, at the evidence folder spread across our table, at Harrison's expectant expression. Then I made the call that would change everything. Marcus? It's Amara. I need to schedule a meeting with you before the HR session this morning. There's something important I need to tell you about my future with Meridian Technologies. As I hung up, Harrison raised his coffee cup in a subtle toast. Welcome to the beginning of your real career. Ms. Santos, for the first time in 20 years, being called by my maiden name felt like coming home. The drive back to Meridian felt different this time. I wasn't rushing to save my marriage or scrambling to understand my husband's betrayal. I was driving toward a confrontation I'd been unconsciously preparing for my entire career. The moment when I would finally stop being half of someone else's equation and start being the complete solution to my own life. Marcus's assistant had squeezed me in for a 9:15 meeting, 15 minutes before the emergency HR session. As I walked through the Meridian lobby, I noticed the subtle signs of corporate crisis management. Hushed conversations near the elevators, executives checking their phones more frequently than usual, the kind of contained energy that preceded major organizational upheaval. Jenny intercepted me near the elevator bank, her expression tense with concern. Amara, I don't know what's happening, but Dale's been in Marcus's office since 7:30 this morning. Security escorted someone from IT up there an hour ago with boxes of equipment. IT involvement meant they were conducting digital forensics. Harrison's evidence folder had probably prompted Marcus to dig deeper into company communications, and what they were finding was clearly worse than anyone had anticipated. Has anyone seen Sophia this morning? I asked. Jenny shook her head. She called in sick. First time she's missed work since she started here. Of course she had. The rats were already abandoning the sinking ship. Marcus's office door was closed when I arrived, but I could hear raised voices through the walls. Dale's voice, strained and defensive, punctuated by Marcus's calm, measured responses. I couldn't make out specific words, but the tone told the entire story. Confrontation, denial, the slow dismantling of carefully constructed lies. At exactly 9:15, Dale emerged from the office looking like he'd aged 5 years in 2 hours. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie crooked, and there were stress lines around his eyes that made him look both desperate and defeated. He saw me, waiting, and stopped short, his expression shifting from desperation to something approaching suspicion. What are you doing here? he asked, his voice strained. I have a meeting with Marcus. About what? For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old impulse to protect him, to make excuses, to smooth over his obvious distress. Then I remembered the photos of him with Sophia, the systematic theft of credit from talented colleagues, the months of lies delivered with casual indifference. About my future, I said simply. Dale stared at me, and I could see the moment when he realized that the wife who'd always been his strongest supporter might not be playing for his team anymore. Amara, whatever Marcus told you about the performance. Analysis. You have to understand that leadership is complicated. Sometimes the metrics don't capture the full picture of... Mr. Richardson, Marcus's assistant interrupted from the doorway. Mr. Whitmore needs to see you in HR Conference Room B in 10 minutes. The disciplinary committee is ready for your... Statement. Disciplinary committee. The words hit Dale like a physical blow. This wasn't just about reorganization anymore. This was about potential termination, about the systematic dismantling of his professional reputation. We'll talk later, he said to me, but it sounded more like a plea than a promise. I watched him walk toward the elevator, his confident stride replaced by the uncertain gait of someone whose world was collapsing in real time. Ms. Santos, Marcus called from his office doorway. Please come in. The formality of using my maiden name felt deliberate, significant. Inside his office, I noticed the boxes of printed documents, the laptop computers, the evidence of a thorough investigation into Dale's department. Thank you for coming in early, Marcus said, settling behind his desk. I assume you know why I wanted to speak with you privately. I imagine it has something to do with the performance audit results. Marcus nodded grimly. The results were worse than I initially shared with you. What we discovered yesterday was just the tip of the iceberg. When we conducted a full digital forensics review of departmental communications, we found evidence of systematic intellectual property theft, misappropriation of company resources, and what can only be described as a conspiracy to defraud both the company and individual contributors of proper attribution. He opened one of the evidence boxes and pulled out a thick stack of printed emails. These communications between your husband and Ms. Blake span 8 months. They show detailed coordination of presentation materials, strategic document sharing, and planning for what they called post-succession restructuring, essentially a plan to eliminate contributors whose work they'd been claiming as their own. I felt sick reading the subject lines: Henderson Strategy Revision, Final Version, Q3 Projections, Your Input Incorporated, Marketing Initiative Cleanup, Ready for Board Presentation. They were editing other people's work and presenting it as collaborative development, Marcus continued. But the original files, the email chains, the meeting notes, they all show the same pattern. Ideas originated from department staff, were refined by you, then claimed and presented by Dale with Sophia listed as a co-contributor. Co-contributor, I repeated, the words tasting bitter. She was being positioned as a strategic partner. More than that. These emails suggest they were planning to present her as the primary innovation driver for the department, once Dale became CEO. Your work, Angela's work, Denver's work, Archie's work, all of it was going to be attributed to her. Fresh perspective and strategic thinking. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking. Dale hadn't just been having an affair. He'd been planning to rewrite the entire history of our department's success, casting himself as the visionary leader and Sophia as the brilliant young strategist who'd revolutionized our approach. There's more, Marcus said, pulling out another folder. We found communications with external recruiters, discussing the formation of what Dale called his strategic dream team. He was planning to bring key staff members to his new role, but the position descriptions show their ideas being repackaged as company intellectual property developed under his and Sophia's leadership. I thought about Angela's digital marketing initiative, Denver's customer retention analysis, Archie's forecasting model, all the innovations that had been suppressed or stolen, all the talent that had been systematically undermined. Marcus, I need to tell you something, I began, but he held up a hand. Before you say anything, I want you to know that I'm recommending immediate termination for Dale and Ms. Blake, pending a full legal review of potential intellectual property theft. The board agrees that this level of systematic deception is incompatible with executive leadership. The word should have triggered sadness, sympathy, some emotional response to my husband's professional destruction. Instead, I felt only clarity. I'm resigning from Meridian Technologies, effective 2 weeks from today, I said quietly. Marcus looked surprised. Amara, you don't need to resign. I told you yesterday that we want to promote you, to recognize your actual contributions. You'd be taking over Dale's responsibilities and more. I appreciate that, Marcus. More than you know. But I've realized that I need to build something new, not fix something that's been fundamentally compromised. I thought about Harrison's offer, about the team we could assemble, about the chance to create a company culture based on actual merit rather than political manipulation. I understand, Marcus said after a long pause, and I respect your decision. You've handled this situation with more grace than most people would under similar circumstances. As I prepared to leave his office, Marcus added quietly, For what it's worth, Amara, your husband never deserved you, either personally or professionally. The kindness in his voice almost broke my composure, but I managed to smile and thank him before walking out into the hallway where my real life was finally about to begin. By Monday morning, I would be sitting in a very different boardroom, making very different decisions as the CEO of Titan Industries. The Titan Industries boardroom was everything Meridian's wasn't. Modern without being sterile, confident without being arrogant. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Elliott Bay, and the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished conference table where my new life was about to officially begin. Harrison sat at the head of the table, flanked by board members I'd only read about in business journals. These were serious people, former CEOs, venture capitalists, industry legends who'd built empires from vision and determination. The fact that they were here to approve my appointment felt both surreal and inevitable. Ladies and gentlemen, Harrison began, I'd like to formally introduce Amara Santos, incoming CEO of Titan Industries. The use of my maiden name in this context felt like a declaration of independence. I was no longer the other half of a power couple, no longer defined by someone else's achievements or failures. I was Amara Santos, and that was enough. As Harrison outlined the transition plan, my phone vibrated continuously with messages I refused to check. Dale's desperate attempts to reach me had been escalating since I'd left Meridian, but I had nothing left to say to him. The press release goes out at market close, Harrison continued. Monday morning, we'll announce the key appointments to the executive team. Denver Walsh as VP of Strategic Partnerships, Angela Park heading Client Engagement, Archie Thompson as CFO. Hearing their names in this context, finally being recognized for their actual talents instead of being exploited for Dale's advancement, felt like justice served at exactly the right temperature. Board member Patricia Williams leaned forward. Ms. Santos, walk us through your vision for Titan's first year under your leadership. This was the moment I'd been unconsciously preparing for my entire career. Not just the strategic vision, but the leadership philosophy that would define everything we built together. Innovation without exploitation, I began. We're going to create an environment where the best ideas rise to the top regardless of who presents them, where credit goes to contributors rather than managers, where collaboration means partnership rather than appropriation. I thought about Dale's systematic theft of credit, about talented people suppressed and undermined, about the culture of intellectual parasitism that had defined my last decade at Meridian. We're going to prove that you can build a billion-dollar company without stealing from the people who do the actual work. The room was quiet, absorbing not just my words but the conviction behind them. These weren't theoretical management principles. They were battle-tested insights earned through betrayal and transformation. My phone buzzed again. This time I glanced at it. Emergency at home. Please come. I need you. Dale. I turned the phone face down and continued my presentation. Market penetration will focus on sectors where Meridian has shown strategic weakness: emerging technologies, sustainable solutions, international partnerships. We already have preliminary agreements with 3 major clients who are ready to move their business based on personnel changes. Harrison smiled knowingly. Those clients were probably companies I'd developed relationships with personally, relationships that had always been attributed to Dale's leadership, but were actually built on my strategic insights and authentic connections. Our competitive advantage will be authenticity, I continued. While other firms promise innovation, we'll deliver it because we're not suppressing the people who generate it. While other firms claim collaborative partnerships, we'll demonstrate it by sharing credit where credit is due. Board member James Morrison, former CEO of Pacific Tech Solutions, nodded approvingly. This sounds like a response to specific market failures. Are we targeting particular competitors? I smiled. We're not targeting anyone specifically. We're simply offering what they can't: genuine strategic innovation without the political manipulation that destroys talented teams. Finally, I said, standing to look out at Elliott Bay, we're going to demonstrate that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's massive success built on genuine merit. The room erupted in questions about implementation timelines, resource allocation, and competitive positioning. For the next hour, I fielded inquiries with the confidence of someone who'd been strategically planning this transformation for months without realizing it. Every question about market penetration drew on insights I'd developed at Meridian but never been allowed to fully implement. Every discussion of team building reflected lessons learned from watching talented people be systematically undermined. Every strategic decision was informed by years of seeing innovation suppressed in favor of credit claiming. The vote was unanimous. I was officially CEO of Titan Industries, effective immediately. As board members congratulated me and discussed implementation details, I felt my phone buzzing again. Multiple missed calls from Dale, increasingly frantic text messages, even a voicemail from Sophia. Apparently her sick day hadn't prevented her from monitoring the situation. But their panic belonged to a different chapter of my life, one that had ended the moment I'd walked out of Meridian Technologies. Walking to my new office, Harrison's old corner suite with views of the city, I was about to conquer. I finally allowed myself to smile. The breaking point hadn't broken me. It had revealed exactly how strong I'd always been. Harrison appeared in my doorway as I was settling behind my new desk. How does it feel to be the most powerful woman in Seattle tech? He asked. Like I'm finally where I was always supposed to be, I replied, looking out at the skyline. Like I've been preparing for this moment my entire career without knowing it. He handed me a bottle of champagne with a note. For the woman who turned betrayal into breakthrough. The Phoenix Rises. HR. As I opened the champagne and poured 2 glasses, I thought about the breaking point that had brought me here. Dale's betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had forced me to remember who I'd been before I'd started compromising my potential to preserve a marriage that had only existed in my imagination. The breaking point had been the moment I stopped being afraid of what I might lose and started getting excited about what I might gain. Dale had thought he was discarding me for an upgrade. Instead, he'd given me permission to become everything I'd been holding back to preserve a relationship built on lies. The Phoenix wasn't just rising from the ashes. She was about to set the entire industry on fire. My new office felt like stepping into a parallel universe where I was finally the protagonist of my own story. Harrison had left everything pristine: the executive desk, the leather chairs, even a bottle of champagne with a note, for the woman who was always meant to lead. HR. I was reviewing Titan's quarterly reports when my assistant knocked. Ms. Santos, you have visitors. Denver, Angela, and Archie stood in my doorway, their expressions a mixture of excitement and disbelief. They'd clearly come straight from Meridian, Denver still wearing his visitor's badge, Angela clutching a box of personal items, Archie looking like he'd just escaped from prison. "Is this real?" Angela asked, stepping into the office. "Are we really doing this?" "As real as Dale's termination," I replied, gesturing for them to sit, "which, according to my sources, became official about an hour ago." Archie whistled low. 22 years at that company, and he destroyed it all in 8 months. He destroyed it all the moment he chose personal ambition over professional integrity, I corrected. "We're just the ones who finally documented it properly." I opened my laptop and pulled up the organizational chart I'd been developing. "This is what we're building. Denver Strategic Partnerships. You'll have full authority to pursue the aggressive client relationships Dale blocked. Angela, client engagement and innovation. Every digital marketing initiative you've been developing gets implemented immediately. Archie, CFO with complete financial oversight. No more having your forecasting models stolen and rebranded." They studied the structure, and I could see the moment when it hit them. This wasn't just a new job. It was validation of everything they'd been capable of, but never allowed to pursue. "What about compensation?" Denver asked, ever the negotiator. I slid salary offers across the desk that made their eyes widen. Base salary, equity participation, and performance bonuses tied to company growth rather than department politics. "When we succeed, we all succeed." "When do we start?" Angela asked, her marketing mind already spinning with possibilities. "Monday morning, but first, we need to handle the weekend." I pulled out my phone and showed them the 23 missed calls from Dale, the 17 text messages ranging from angry to desperate to pleading. He's going to try to sabotage this transition. He'll call clients, spread rumors, maybe even try legal challenges. We need to be prepared. Archie leaned forward. "What do you need us to do?" "Document everything. Every client relationship you've built, every project you've contributed to, every innovation that got buried under Dale's credit claiming. We're going to make it impossible for him to rewrite history." Angela was already taking notes. "I still have copies of all my original proposals, the ones Dale killed or modified beyond recognition." "Perfect. Denver, I need you to reach out to your key contacts before Dale tries to poison those relationships. Be honest about the transition. Most of them will probably be relieved to work with someone who actually understands their needs." My phone buzzed with another text from Dale. "The house is in both our names. We need to discuss logistics. This affects both of us." I showed them the message, and Denver snorted. "Even now, he's trying to make it about him." "Not anymore," I said, blocking Dale's number. "From now on, all communication goes through lawyers. I'm done being manipulated by someone who spent months planning my professional elimination while sharing my bed." The room fell quiet as the full scope of Dale's betrayal sank in. These weren't just colleagues who'd been exploited. They were allies who understood that what had happened to me could have happened to any of them. "There's something else," I said, opening the Titan Industries strategic plan Harrison had left for me. "We're not just building a better company than Meridian. We're going to become their biggest competitor, and we're going to do it by implementing every innovative idea Dale suppressed." Angela grinned. "So we're turning his greatest weakness into our greatest strength." Exactly. Every talent he overlooked, every strategy he killed, every relationship he took for granted, it all becomes our competitive advantage. As they prepared to leave, Archie paused at the door. "Amara, for what it's worth, we all knew. Maybe not. About Sophia specifically, but we knew Dale was taking credit for work that wasn't his. We should have said something sooner." "You're saying something now," I replied. "And that's what matters." After they left, I sat in my new office as the Seattle skyline began to twinkle with evening lights. Tomorrow, Dale would wake up unemployed, facing potential legal action. his carefully constructed reputation in ruins. I would wake up as the CEO of his biggest competitor, surrounded by the talent he'd wasted, ready to implement the vision he'd been too small to see. Strategic planning had never felt so much like poetic justice. I should have known Dale wouldn't respect boundaries, even legal ones. At 7:47 p.m., I pulled into my driveway to find him sitting on our front steps, still wearing his rumpled suit from the disciplinary hearing, looking like a man who'd lost everything in a single day, which, technically, he had. "You blocked my number," he said as I approached, his voice a mixture of accusation and desperation. "I blocked my husband's number," I replied, pulling out my keys. "I don't have a husband anymore." "Amara, please, we need to talk about this like adults." The audacity was breathtaking. After months of lies, systematic betrayal, and professional sabotage, he wanted to talk like adults. "Adults don't steal credit from their colleagues," I said, unlocking the front door. "Adults don't conduct affairs with their assistants. Adults don't try to eliminate their wives from their own careers." Dale followed me inside, and I noticed how different our house looked now. Not like a home, but like a stage set for a marriage that had never really existed. "I know you're angry about Sophia, but—" "I'm not angry about Sophia," I interrupted, setting my purse down. "I'm angry about the systematic theft of intellectual property. I'm angry about you planning to eliminate my position while pretending to be my loving husband. I'm angry about you recruiting my colleagues to build your career on stolen work." Dale's face went pale. "How do you know about your shadow organization? About the 8 months of coordination with Sophia to steal credit? About your plan to rewrite departmental history?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the press release Harrison had sent. "About my new position as CEO of Titan Industries?" He stared at the screen, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that looked like fear. "You're working for Harrison Reed? Our biggest competitor?" "I'm not working for anyone, Dale. I own the company now. Harrison sold it to me." The lie came easily, and I could see it hit him like a physical blow. He sank into our leather sofa, the one we'd chosen together 3 years ago, looking smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. "This is about revenge," he said quietly. "This is about consequences," I corrected. "You made choices, Dale. You chose deception over honesty. You chose career advancement over professional integrity. You chose a 23-year-old assistant over a 20-year marriage. I'm just responding to the choices you already made. I never meant for it to go this far. You meant for it to go exactly this far. You planned every step, eliminating my position, promoting Sophia, taking credit for everyone's work. The only thing you didn't plan for was getting caught." Dale stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked our perfectly manicured yard. "What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices. Meridian is conducting a legal review of intellectual property theft. Your professional reputation is destroyed, and your wife is filing for divorce on Monday morning." He turned to face me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the man I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. Vulnerable, uncertain, almost human. "I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. Marriage counseling, couples therapy. We can rebuild, Dale." I stood up, my voice firm but not unkind. "You didn't make mistakes. You made strategic decisions over months of careful planning. You systematically eliminated me from your future while pretending we still had one together. There's nothing left to rebuild. And if I fight the divorce, if I contest the property division," I smiled, recognizing the Dale I'd known best. The one who always looked for angles, leverage, ways to win, even when he'd already lost. "Then you'll discover that the woman you tried to eliminate from your career is much better at strategic planning than you ever realized." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him processing the transformation, finally understanding that the supportive wife who'd always smoothed his way was gone forever. "I loved you," he said finally. "You loved having me," I replied. "There's a difference." After he left, I walked through our house one last time, seeing it clearly for what it had always been, not a home built on partnership, but a monument to Dale's ambitions, furnished with my unacknowledged sacrifices. By Monday, I would be announcing Denver, Angela, and Archie as my executive team. By Tuesday, I would be meeting with the clients Dale thought he controlled. By the end of the month, I would be competing directly with Meridian Technologies using every innovation Dale had suppressed. The confrontation was over. The real victory was just beginning. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October clarity that made Seattle look like a city of infinite possibilities. I stood in my new corner office at Titan Industries, watching the press coverage of my appointment spread across business news sites like wildfire. "Former Meridian VP takes helm of Titan Industries," read the Seattle Business Journal headline. The article was diplomatic but telling. Santos brings extensive strategic development experience and a deep understanding of Pacific Northwest technology markets. What it didn't say, but what everyone in the industry would understand, was that Meridian's loss had just become their biggest competitive threat. My assistant knocked. "Ms. Santos, your 9 a.m. is here." 3 of Meridian's most important clients filed into my office, representatives from Henderson Tech, Pacific Solutions, and Northwest Digital. Companies I'd spent years building relationships with, accounts that had generated over $200 million in revenue under my strategic guidance. "Congratulations on the new position, Amara," said James Henderson, CEO of Henderson Tech. "Though I have to say, we're concerned about the transition at Meridian." "What kind of concerns?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "Dale Richardson called me personally on Friday evening," said Patricia Chen from Pacific Solutions. "He was erratic, talking about client relationship changes, personnel disruptions. He seemed to be suggesting that key strategic initiatives might be compromised." I wasn't surprised. Dale's desperation had predictably led him to try poisoning the relationships he'd never actually built. "He also mentioned that you might be in a compromised position due to personal conflicts," added Marcus Webb from Northwest Digital. "Something about divorce proceedings affecting your professional judgment." The room fell silent. These were sophisticated business leaders who'd worked with me for years. They knew exactly where the strategic insights had come from, regardless of whose name had been on the presentations. "Gentlemen, Patricia," I said, leaning forward, "let me be direct. Dale Richardson was terminated from Meridian on Friday for systematic intellectual property theft and misappropriation of strategic contributions. The work you've valued over the past several years, the innovative approaches that saved your companies millions in operational costs, the market analysis that positioned you ahead of your competitors, that work came from my team and me." I opened my laptop and pulled up detailed project files. These are the original strategic documents with timestamps and contributor attribution. You'll notice that the insights you implemented successfully originated from specific team members: myself, Denver Walsh, Angela Park, Archie Thompson, all of whom are now part of Titan Industries' executive leadership. James Henderson studied the documents. "This is comprehensive strategic analysis, far more detailed than what we typically received in final presentations." Because Dale simplified and rebranded our work for board presentations, often removing the innovative elements that made the strategies effective. Patricia leaned back in her chair. "So, when you say Dale was terminated for intellectual property theft?" "I mean exactly that. 8 months of documented evidence showing systematic appropriation of team contributions, coordination with his assistant to claim credit for others' work, and plans to eliminate the actual contributors once he achieved executive leadership." The implications hung in the air. These clients had built their strategic partnerships based on work that Dale had stolen, relationships he'd claimed but never actually developed. "What happens to our accounts at Meridian?" Marcus asked. "That's not my decision to make," I replied. "But I can tell you that the strategic team you've actually been working with, the people who developed the analysis, implemented the solutions, and delivered the results, we're all here at Titan now." James Henderson smiled. "And if we were to consider transitioning our strategic consulting relationship, you'd be working directly with the people who've been solving your problems all along, without the middleman who was claiming credit." By noon, all three companies had submitted formal requests to terminate their Meridian contracts and engage Titan Industries for strategic consulting. The transition would cost Meridian approximately $50 million in annual revenue. My phone buzzed, with a text from Jenny. "Dale cleaning out his office. Sophia nowhere to be seen. Marcus wants to discuss damage control for client relationships. Heard you might know something about that?" I smiled and typed back. "Just following the natural. Market response to authentic strategic partnerships. Give Marcus my regards." The afternoon brought more calls, other Meridian clients who'd heard about the executive changes and wanted to understand their options. Each conversation followed the same pattern: surprise about Dale's termination, relief about working directly with the strategic team they'd valued, and interest in continuing those relationships at Titan. By 5 p.m., we'd secured $75 million in new business from companies that had never actually been Dale's clients to begin with. Harrison appeared in my doorway, grinning like a man who just watched his greatest competitor implode in real time. "How does it feel to be the most successful CEO in Seattle on your first day?" he asked. "Like justice served at exactly the right temperature," I replied. The immediate consequences were clear. Dale's betrayal had backfired spectacularly. The stolen relationships were returning to their original source, and Titan Industries was about to become the fastest-growing strategic consulting firm in the Pacific Northwest, all because Dale Richardson had forgotten that you can't steal what was never yours to begin with. 3 months later, I stood before the Seattle Chamber of Commerce, accepting the Executive Leadership Excellence Award while Dale sat in his studio apartment in Tacoma, unemployed and facing mounting legal bills. The transformation was complete, but the real satisfaction came from what we'd built, not what he'd lost. When I started at Titan Industries, I said to the packed auditorium, I made a promise that we would create an environment where innovation thrives without exploitation, where credit goes to contributors rather than managers, where collaboration means partnership rather than appropriation. The audience included several former Meridian employees who'd joined our growing team, clients who'd followed us from Dale's shadow into authentic partnerships, and competitors who were scrambling to understand how we'd captured 30% of the Pacific Northwest strategic consulting market in 90 days. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that Titan Industries has achieved something unprecedented in our industry: 100% employee retention, 97% client satisfaction, and revenue growth of 400% in our first quarter under new leadership. The applause was genuine, but the real victory was sitting in the front row: Denver, Angela, and Archie, finally receiving recognition for innovations that had been suppressed for years. Angela's digital marketing platform had just won the YESI Industries Innovation Award. Denver's client relationship model was being studied by business schools. Archie's predictive analytics had saved our clients $50 million in operational costs. After the ceremony, Harrison approached with 2 glasses of champagne. Remember when you asked if I was orchestrating Dale's downfall or just documenting it? I remember. The answer was neither. I was creating space for talent to flourish. Dale's downfall was just the inevitable result of his own choices catching up with him. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Former Meridian executive faces criminal charges in intellectual property theft case. The article detailed how the FBI's investigation had uncovered Dale's systematic appropriation of copyrighted strategic materials, falsified attribution in client presentations, and conspiracy to defraud both the company and individual contributors. Sophia had apparently turned state's evidence in exchange for immunity, providing detailed testimony about Dale's instructions to steal and rebrand other people's work. Her cooperation had strengthened the case against him while destroying any remaining pretense about their relationship. "Any regrets?" Harrison asked, noticing my expression as I read the news. "About Dale?" "No. He created this situation through months of deliberate choices. I'm just sorry it took so long for the consequences to catch up with him." What I didn't tell Harrison was that I'd received a letter from Dale the previous week, a rambling, self-pitying document that blamed everyone but himself for his situation. He'd somehow convinced himself that I'd orchestrated his downfall, that Harrison had manipulated events, that Sophia had betrayed him. Even facing criminal charges, he couldn't accept responsibility for his own actions. I'd thrown the letter away without finishing it. "There's something else," Harrison said, pulling out an official-looking document. "The Titan board met yesterday. They've approved your proposal to establish the Santos Innovation Fund, $10 million to support young professionals from underrepresented backgrounds entering strategic consulting. The fund was my way of ensuring that other talented people wouldn't face the barriers I'd encountered, wouldn't have to choose between being authentic and being successful. The first scholarship recipient has already been selected," Harrison continued. "A young Filipino-American woman from the University of Washington, graduating summa cum laude with an MBA in strategic management. Reminds me of someone I used to know." I smiled, thinking about my parents, about the sacrifices they'd made so I could have opportunities they'd never dreamed of. The scholarship would be awarded in their memory, Miguel and Carmen Santos, who'd taught me that success meant lifting others as you climb. My assistant appeared at my elbow. "Ms. Santos? There's a call for you." "Bobby Santos." I excused myself and took the call in a quiet corner. "Congratulations, sis." My brother's voice was warm with pride. "Mama and Papa would be over the moon seeing you tonight." I wish they were here to see it. They are here. Every time you choose integrity over convenience, every time you build something instead of tearing something down, every time you remember where you came from, they're right there with you. As the evening wound down, I drove through Seattle's downtown core, past the Meridian building where Dale had once expected to rule, past the coffee shop where Mrs. Patterson had offered her wisdom about second chances, past all the landmarks of my old life. I wasn't the same woman who'd discovered her husband's betrayal 4 months ago. That woman had been defined by her relationships, her partnerships, her role as half of someone else's success story. I was Amara Santos now, CEO, leader, architect of her own extraordinary destiny, and I was just getting started. The best revenge hadn't been Dale's destruction. It had been my transformation into everything I'd always been capable of becoming. 1 year after Dale left me for his 23-year-old assistant, I stood in the penthouse office of the building I'd just purchased, the same building that housed Meridian Technologies 15 floors below. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, least of all me. Titan Industries now employed 200 people, including 30 former Meridian employees who'd followed genuine leadership over stolen credit. We'd become the fastest-growing strategic consulting firm on the West Coast, with offices in Portland, San Francisco, and Vancouver opening within the month. Dale Richardson, meanwhile, had just begun serving an 18-month sentence for criminal intellectual property theft. Sophia Blake had disappeared entirely after her testimony, her influencer dreams replaced by the reality of being unemployed and unemployable in the tech industry. But their fates weren't what defined my success. What mattered was the culture we'd built, a place where innovation flourished without exploitation, where talent was recognized regardless of its source, where collaboration meant genuine partnership rather than sophisticated theft. The final quarter numbers are in, Denver announced, entering my office with Angela and Archie. We just became the third largest strategic consulting firm in the Pacific Northwest. And the fastest growing, Angela added, grinning. Plus, 3 more Meridian clients submitted transition requests this week. I looked down at the street below, where I could see Meridian employees leaving their building at the end of another day. Some of them had reached out over the months, asking about opportunities at Titan. Others had stayed, trying to rebuild what Dale's betrayal had damaged. You know what I've learned this year? I said, turning back to my team. The people who try to steal success never actually understand what success looks like. Dale thought success was taking credit, claiming achievements, positioning himself at the top of other people's work. What is it really? Archie asked. Success is building something that creates more success for others. It's knowing that your victory lifts everyone around you, not just yourself. My phone chimed with a message from Bobby. Proud of you, sis. The whole family is. You didn't just rebuild your life. You built something that honors everyone who helped you get here. He was right. The Santos Innovation Fund had awarded 15 scholarships to promising young professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. 3 of them were now working at Titan, bringing fresh perspectives and innovative approaches that kept us ahead of the competition. Mrs. Patterson from the Grindhouse had sent a card last week. You proved that sometimes the universe pushes us off one path so we can find the right one. Your story gives hope to everyone who thinks their best days are behind them. As evening settled over Seattle, I reflected on the journey from Amara Richardson, supportive wife, overlooked partner, half of someone else's success story, to Amara Santos, CEO, leader, and architect of her own extraordinary destiny. Dale had thought he was discarding me for a newer model. Instead, he'd given me permission to remember who I'd always been beneath the compromises and accommodations of a marriage built on lies. The woman who'd clawed her way out of poverty hadn't disappeared when she became Mrs. Richardson. She'd just been waiting for the right moment to remind the world what she was capable of achieving. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is losing everything you thought you wanted. It creates space for everything you were actually meant to have. Dale left me for his 23-year-old assistant, thinking he was getting the promotion and the girl. Instead, I became CEO of his dream company, surrounded by people who valued authentic leadership over stolen credit. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.